The Russian Special Forces University of Vladimir Putin, believe it or not, this is the title, in the Chechen city of Gorda was damaged by a drone attack. Let us talk about that. How likely the US is to lift restrictions on long-range weapons if North Korean soldiers cross Ukrainian border. And senior fellow in air power and international security at the Royal Air Force College at Cranwell, Dr. Frank Ledvich, answers our questions in a Blitz interview. Good afternoon. These topics in more detail in our daily episode, as usual, with me, Henry Keane, and UATV English, doing our best to bring the hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world, directly from Ukraine. The Russian Special Forces University of Vladimir Putin, this is the title, right, in the Chechen city of Gorda was damaged by a drone attack, and that Putin's Special Forces University, whatever that means, should consider it actually a drone attack a good news, as only Kadyrov and Putin knew that this facility existed before until that drone changed the narrative completely. Now, I and you, we all know. But let me take the story step by step and, of course, in easy terms for you. First, the Russian Special Forces University of Vladimir Putin in Chechen city of Gorda indeed was damaged by a drone attack, marking the first actually drone strike against Russia's North Caucasus Republic. Then Chechen dictator Ramzan Kadyrov accused Ukraine of the attack and boasted openly that he used Ukrainian prisoners of war as human shields, claiming there were casualties among them. Worth noting that previously, mobster Kadyrov said that the targeted building was empty and there were no casualties. Then a Chechen dictator changed a heart and claimed that Ukrainian POVs were there and were killed as a result.
Up to 10 Ukrainian prisoners are held at each strategic facility in the Chechen Republic, including on the territory of the Russian Special Forces University. Kyiv, trying to harm us, killed its own soldiers today. Ramzan Kadyrov on Telegram.
Well, official Kyiv does not claim responsibility for the attack, nor comment in any way on Kadyrov's six boasting. Well, of course, why? What is the point anyway? Everyone knows that the use of prisoners as human shields is not just inhumane. Who cares about humane things like ethics and morality in Kadyrov's entourage? Human shields are banned under the Geneva Convention and classified as a war crime. Everyone knows that too. Everyone also knows that Kadyrov provides no evidence to back his allegations. He never does. No dictator does. Well, what can I add here is one thing. A watchdog is a loyal animal, so I think I will make a mistake if I will compare Ramzan Kadyrov to a watchdog. But Ramzan Kadyrov is no watchdog. He is a property of Russian Tsar Putin, doing what he is told, acting when allowed, talking what and when commanded from the Kremlin. Were there Ukrainian POVs in that building or not, I can't say that, but I surely can imagine them being dead by now, executed by Kadyrov following his Kremlin's master's command. North Koreans are marching towards Ukraine, and what we hear is the United States saying it will not introduce new restrictions on Ukraine's use of American weapons if North Korean troops engage in combat.
A portion of those soldiers have already moved closer to Ukraine, and we are increasingly concerned that Russia intends to use these soldiers in combat or to support combat operations against Ukrainian forces in Russia's Kursk Oblast near the border with Ukraine. Sabrina Singh, Pentagon spokesperson.
Seriously? No new restrictions. That means no more no's added to already not using a weapon that can save lives, Ukraine, bring back safety to Europe and win the war. I mean, actually, seriously winning the war and not trading Ukrainian lives for oil prices or anything. I'm starting to think that Putin might be right to be provoking the West with North Korean cannon fodder marching in Ukraine, as the timidity of the West is unbelievable. It is beyond any reasonable logic. And that very timidity is taken by dictator Putin exactly for what it is, for what it actually is, a reason to continue his criminal affair in Ukraine. And who would ever thought that the one to change that collective foul paradigm of Western if they, then we, that allows the world to do only half of what it actually takes to win over dictatorship, who would ever thought that that very knight in shiny armor would turn out to be North Korea?
Mr. President, are you worried about the North Korean troops in Kursk, in Russia?
I am concerned about it, yes.
Should Ukrainians strike back?
They cross into through Ukraine, yes.
And what about South Korea? Well, South Korea is currently not considering directly providing direct military aid to Ukraine, the Yonhap news agency reports, and that is because Seoul has not received such a request from Ukrainian side. The country's president, Yoon Suk-yeol, said South Korea might revise its stance in the light of deepening cooperation between Russia and North Korea. Well, amen to that. Dr. Frank Ledwidge is a senior fellow in air power and international security at the Royal Air Force College at Cranwell. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon to you.
Hello. When North Korean cannon fodder is in Ukraine, Pentagon says no new restrictions on American weapons. Do you know, what does it mean? What does it mean, no new restrictions? Like old nose was not no enough or something?
The last reference, I can only assume, is somehow meant to refer to the request by Zelensky in his most recent victory plan that the Americans donate Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine, which they have unequivocally ruled out. I think what they're saying is that is an old restriction and will not be changed. That's all I can assume by that.
All right, well, let's see how the situation will develop. But let me ask you the question that you probably know the answer, because you're a professional, obviously. America's F-16s, Russian MiGs and Sus, French Mirage, maintenance is costly and takes time. So what do you think is better? That fighter jet zoo, pardon me for that saying,
Exactly.
or less machines, but more strategically and militarily homogeneous, so to say?
Yeah, I think that's essential. Everybody's promising jets.
Right.
It's my understanding, by the way, if we just look by analogy at the land domain, the Ukrainian army now has who knows how many now versions of Western tanks, not to mention their own quite capable ex-Soviet models, such as the T-64, which are perfectly capable of doing whatever job they need to do. Instead, what's happened is much has happened, by the way, with the German army in the campaign against the Soviet Union. Their excellent kit was completely rendered, or not completely, but rendered largely ineffectual by the multiple chains of logistics supplied to multiple types of tank. And of course, the same applies, except more so in the air. And I've always argued that if you're going to have an army, then let it be an army with one species of kit, namely the Americans, probably, rather than 15, namely everybody and his wife in Europe, which is causing chaos logistically. And we're seeing that same syndrome develop in the air. Not only, of course, just to finish on this, do you need to have the equipment, the replacement parts, spare parts. You also need highly trained maintenance engineers for aircraft. And that takes almost as long to develop that kind of expertise as for the air crew. So to conclude, it's a poor idea and should be pushed back against to have these multiple, a zoo, as you say, of different models of aircraft from different countries. They have no relation.
Exactly. Right. Well, thank you so very much. Well, there's another thing that I can't agree more. So Ukraine is in serious trouble. The West has no real strategy, says your article. I couldn't agree more. So no strategy, I can see that. I can feel that. I am in Kiev, in Ukraine right now. Yes. But my question is, why do you think this is the case?
Because the West is very poor at strategy and has been since the end of the Cold War. I mean, I hesitate to mention this, but it's perhaps the best answer. If you saw the disasters that we wrought in the Balkans, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, all of them were due to a failure to understand what the objective is. And we see it again today in England. We had a budget today, for what it's worth, and the usual specious, vapid comments and what have you. And one of them was, we're supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes. Well, that's great, but what's it? What is it we're there to support? What is it? There's no
talking bomb.
That's what a strategy is, or requires, first of all.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when I look, about all this massive information that just falls on my head, and I believe that the secret weapon of West, of the collective West, so to say, is the talking bomb that we are about to, drop on Putin's head and talk sense to him, which is not going to happen, obviously. So there is no strategy. There are a peace formula. Everyone has a peace formula or a victory plan on his own. If the Zelensky plan is more or less credible than someone else like Friends of Peace from China. What is that?
Look, the fact is that I'm afraid, and I hesitate to say this as well, it's much more serious than anything else I'm going to say today, that I think we have to take the United States at its word. And it has hardly changed its approach for what it is, which is to say the end of its strategy. And that is we will have to bleed the Russians as long as they can so that they won't do to somewhere in Europe what they're doing to Ukraine. And that, I think, does, to put it mildly, a disservice to the Ukrainian sacrifice that's happened so far. And what Ukraine should be establishing is a very realistic answer is what is it that you're prepared to support, for how long, and with how much? Right now, there's no answer to that except, well, we'd like you to fight on as long as you possibly can and see what damage you can do to the Russians. That's not good enough. That's the kind of nonsense we had in Afghanistan, where the answer was, well, we'll just fight on and see what happens.
Thank you so very much for being so honest and straightforward. Let me ask you the last question for today. A most congenial spy, MI6 spy turned novelist, spills the beans on Russian espionage. Tell us more about it.
Yes, this is Charles Beaumont, who is, I'm very proud to say, a friend of mine and a former, let's put it bluntly, a former spy. And as you and I have discussed before, I am not a spy, and some would say never have been. But I think the same would apply to Charles. He was a spy, or the same by opposition. He was a spy, but is no longer as well. And he has written a couple of books. One is A Spy Alone, and his second novel is coming out quite soon. And essentially, they're about the infiltration of Russian influence, particularly into the UK, but into the West more widely, and the effect that has on our politics. His next book will be on Ukraine itself, and he's visited several times. And I've had a privilege to have an early read of it. It's excellent. And I'm certain it'll be out in Ukraine and Ukrainian in due course. So look out for that, Charles Beaumont. A Spy Alone initially, and then his second book is coming out quite soon.
Can't wait to that.
It's worth waiting for.
Exactly. So I'm waiting. Maybe with a note with a signature, Henry, for you. Can you get it for me?
Sure.
Yeah, lovely. Lovely. That is great. Okay, so thank you so very much for being with us tonight, for your time again, and for your outstanding expertise in your area, and not only in your area, actually. It was a pleasure indeed.
Slava Ukraini.
Heroям слава, дякую.
Exactly.
It was unbelievable, isn't it, to have Dr. Frank Ledwidge, is Senior Fellow in Air Power and International Security at the Royal Air Force College, being so honest and so straightforward with us at UATV English. That is it for tonight. It was me, Henry Keane, and my team at UATV English, and another attempt to bring hard truth in easy terms for you, for the whole free world, directly from Ukraine. Please, do not be shy. Like, subscribe, and comment. Raise your voice. It matters indeed. Thank you so very much, and see you tomorrow. Goodbye.